Hi, everybody. This is Eric with Smart Pot Fabric Planters, and we're back with another episode of The Growing Revolution. We've got a great guest who is a bit outside of our normal wheelhouse, but he was brought to our attention by our owner, Kurt Rieger, and his area of expertise is in branding and marketing, and specifically in cannabis. His name is David Pale, Paleschuck, and he's the author of Branding Bud, the Commercialization of Cannabis. And what's funny is, 10, 12 years ago, we would have never really had this conversation because cannabis was just still under cover of darkness. But, now it's burgeoning into the mainstream industry that it's becoming. So I wanted to welcome David to our show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to be here.
Yes, thanks for your time. Like I said, normally we have on like kind of gardening experts and cultivation experts, but your knowledge base, I think, applies to everybody in our industry, and branding, is in the realm of sales and marketing. So really, everybody, I'm sure, can gain from the information we're going to talk about today. So I'm really excited to meet you and ask some questions. Um, so you've had many years of experience in branding and marketing, both in and out of the cannabis industry. Would you tell us about your background and how you found your way into the cannabis industry?
Yeah, sure. And so the first thing I'd like to say is, even though I'm sort of an outlier in terms of the people you speak to, I'm not a cultivator or an expert in that area. I certainly understand cultivation and how important it is. I understand the plant, I understand terpenes and cannabinoids and the curing process and all of the other things that go into cultivating and talking about the plant. So I've been in the industry now for 12 years, but I've really been around the plant for most of my life. I started off as a professional skateboarder, and through that understood um, lifestyle and lifestyle marketing. Cannabis came into that and transcends lifestyle, not only in skateboarding, but every other dimension of how we live our lives every day, and who we are, and whether it's positive or negative. But my experience has basically been, like you said earlier, in branding and marketing. I've worked for many years at American Express, Mastercard, Microsoft, Pepsi, and Microsoft. And and while at Pepsi, I supported Mountain Dew, and while at Microsoft, I was part of the Xbox team and the devices team. So again, I've always understood how music and art and activities and cannabis come together. So as as in 2012, as the I-502 law passed here in Washington State, and similar law in Colorado, the first two states to launch adult use cannabis, you started to see the mentality shift, right? The initial thought was you don't need to brand cannabis because cannabis sells itself, you know. Um, and sure, that was the case originally. First, it was, is it the brown one or is it the green one?
Right.
And from brown and green, then it was like, is it sativa or indica, or then what strain is it, right? But now it's so far beyond that, and it's beyond. It all comes from the plant and the flower, but it's beyond that now. As you move away from that, it's really become different things, right? So as you go through the form factors, from the flower and then the extracts into the waxes, the butters, and the shatters, and tinctures, and God, sublingual slips, and edibles, and beverages, and transdermal patches, and I could keep on going on, right? But it moves away from the flower, from the plant, if you will, and we get closer to distillates and isolates, and those become ingredients in a brownie or a beverage or things like that. So um, that's where branding becomes important, even more important as you move away from the plant. And I think if you look at Coca-Cola, It's water, caramel color, carbonation, and sugar. But that's not what Coca-Cola is. Coca-Cola is have a Coke and a smile. It's the aspirational feeling that Coke gives you. It's what Nike does. It's what any great brand does, right? And that's where we're moving as we move from the plant, the flower, into regulated markets, semi-regulated markets, which become products, and those products are consumed in the way that we consume everything from beverage all the way through to our toothpaste to our soap and shampoo.
Nice. Now, in your book, Branding Bud, the Commercialization of Cannabis, would you talk a little bit about, what's in there and specifically, how cannabis is being branded?
Yeah, well, the book. So I launched the book on April 20th of last year,
Good
4/20 of
timing.
last year. Yep, and a very competitive time to launch something, anything cannabis related in the market, but nonetheless, we did it. And the book was launched on Amazon, and over the course of the next 6 months, the book became the number one best-selling book in the branding and logo design category, as well as the green business category. And what that shows more than anything is now is the time, right? People are really interested in this. And, there's people that have been in the industry for a very long time, and around the plant for a very long time. I don't even want to use the word industry. And now, as it's shaping and forming and evolving into an industry, there are new people that are coming into the market. So, I thought it was really important to basically better understand not only the plant, but the markets that are evolving and shaping and changing, how they differ from state to state. And on top of that, why are there all these stoner stereotypes surrounding the plant and surrounding in many ways, the brands that came from it? And I'm not necessarily talking about um, branded products right now. I'm talking about Cheech and Chong. I'm talking about Fast Times at
Yeah,
Ridgemont
Spicoli.
High.
Yeah.
That's right. I'm talking about the culture that came from it, and then weeds, and then all the other things, right? Um, and over time, we've started to realize, over probably the last 10 years, 12 years, we've started to realize, wait a second, cannabis consumers aren't all the same. They don't all consume flower or smoke flower. They don't all do anything, you know, similar. They're very different. They're very unique. And surprise, surprise, it's not only my crazy uncle that smoked weed. It's you know my mother, my father, or consumed it in whatever way they did. So it's just interesting that now it's normalizing as it normalizes, where we're just coming to a different place. So the idea was to basically open up the book with um, what what's the um, historical, political, what are those aspects that brought us to a plant that is illegal, and then from there, what created stoner culture, and then from there, what was the path to normalization, regulation, legalization, decriminalization, all of the things that everybody's sort of struggling
Yeah,
with.
yeah, and it
So
makes sense that the stereotype of the cannabis user previously was, kind of the goofball, the outlaw, the rebel, because you kind of had to be a rebel to consume cannabis because it was illegal. But now that it's legal in many states, um, basically anybody across the spectrum can be a user. So that's great to see that the stereotypes are falling. And honestly, like, if people are gonna choose like alcohol or cannabis, I would much rather have them choose cannabis. It's much better for your body than alcohol and other intoxicants. um so in your book, you're writing about the 14 cannabis brand archetypes. For those of us who aren't super familiar with marketing, what is a brand archetype, and would you talk a bit about it?
sure, a brand archetype is a shortcut. I mean, quite frankly, it's something that people resonate with immediately or not. Let me give an example, an analogy. Um, if I played right now 3 seconds of country music, of hip hop music, of classical music, and jazz. You would be able to, most people would be able to say, oh, I heard that, I like that beat, I like that sound, or no, classical isn't my thing, or whatever it is. And so a brand archetype is very much that relative to the brands we purchase every day and to the decisions we make all the time. It could be the clothes we wear with the label on it, or it could be the clothes we wear that we don't want the label on. It could be the products we purchase, and those could be like a Starbucks cup of coffee, or the fact that you don't want a Starbucks cup of coffee, right? That you're an anti-Starbucks person. So we vote, so to speak, with our wallets and our choices every day. So a brand archetype is that last layer, if you will, that calls attention to the consumer. Let's just say the packaging is craft paper and there's green ink on it. It's probably a sustainable brand and it calls your attention to it. If it's black, red, and silver foil on it, it's probably more of a bolder brand, maybe a more masculine brand, right? If it's gray and orange, it's probably a Black and Decker tool. So those types of things speak to us in ways that we don't even realize half the time, and those are brand archetypes. So in the cannabis world for the last 12 years, and also I should mention I worked at Dope Magazine for 4 years of the 12 years while being in the cannabis industry. So, met a lot of people, spent a lot of time with people. But um, what I came across was over and over again, there are certain types of brands that are showing up. When I say certain types, that's what a brand archetype is. So, for example, the first brand that was obvious that showed up was the cultivator brand, right? The cultivator brand was because it was the cultivators that were creating the brand. So, whether it was celebrities coming from that world, I don't know, like Stravinsky or, you know, exactly, exactly. And we could roll down that list. You know, but yeah. So first there were the cultivator brands, and then as things started to change and shift, all of a sudden there were, gender brands. Hey, this is for a woman, and then it's benefit specific, like hey, this is for PMS, or those types of brands, or foodie brands, right? All of a sudden, as food became big, and from farm to the table became big. All of a sudden, it was like, wait a second, you know, I'm a real foodie about this, and I'm a connoisseur or a connoisseur, right? So, there's those types of things. There's, I'll run through them. There's a counterculture brand, even though almost all I can say all cannabis brands are counterculture brands, in that it's cannabis, right? And the other thing that's really important as I go through these, um, they're not mutually exclusive. So you could have brands layered up on each other. So let me just take Whoopi and Maya. So Whoopi and Maya is Whoopi Goldberg. So there's a celebrity component to it, but they also make female-based products, benefit specific for females. So now there's a gender component to it. There's also a charity component to it because they give a certain portion of the proceeds to charity. Um, and so it's an overlay of multiple brands. But when you really break it down, there's the cultivator brand, the gender brand, the foodie brand, health and wellness, counterculture, prohibition, nostalgic, charity, luxury, value, art and design, and region. Regional art, like some of the laws that are coming through in California right now with the triangle, that appellational um, flower that this comes from Humboldt or this comes from Mingo, that sort of thing. When people are fighting for that. So these are all the different types or archetypes of brands that are out there and that are appealing to consumers. And again, just to sort of go through that quickly, for example, let's just take a skater. A skater at the skate park who's going to light up pre-roll with his boys, or girls, or friends. at the skate park is different. That's the counterculture edge. As the smoke walks across the park and the mothers by the swings with their kids look and they sort of grimace at at the skaters smoking weed and making the neighborhood smell like weed. But you know what? Those moms are there pushing their kids on the swings, but they're opening their tin of mints, microdosed mints with their CBD and THC, which have a touch of fruity and elegance to them, and they're microdosing all day too, but they're doing it discreetly in their own way, right? So it's really interesting how like we all use it to medicate, so to speak, but it also plays a role in who we are. Are we rebellious in this time of our life? Are we more discreet? Do we need some pain relief? Those types of things. We all use it differently or consume it differently, as I like to say. And so it's different. We have to meet the consumers where they are, not be pushy. Well, that's a great question, and it's something I talk about all the time. I mean, really, it it goes like this. There's the four pillars of creating a meaningful brand, and the four pillars are one, who's your consumer, and again, are they that skater that wants to be rebellious, that's gonna be awesome to pull out a pack of pre rolls and share it with their friends while they're skating, or are you that mom, that soccer mom perhaps, that you have to be more discreet. You have to microdose throughout the day to take care of your pain or alleviate your pain. It's those types of, of consumers that differ greatly. So, so pillar number one, who is your consumer? Pillar number two is what's their need state, right? Are they being rebellious at the skateboard park? Are they medicating, to alleviate pain? And I always think of this as additive or subtractive. So if you think for a moment of brands, your aspirational brands, like Nike, just do it. You could run so much faster if you have Nikes on than any other thing on your feet, right? Or so that's aspirational. That's about being better than you are. Or there's what I call subtractive, which is more like Advil. It's I need to take this now to alleviate my pain. And those two different mindsets, the additive or subtractive mindsets, are really different. So, depending on what your consumer is doing and how they consume, and then, thirdly, what their need state or ritual is. So, again, is it somebody that takes tincture every night? Is it somebody that gets up in the morning and wakes and bakes? Whoever they are and whatever they do and whatever those rituals are, that's really important to know. And once you finally know that, then you get into the form factor. So are they a consumer that's looking for flour to put into their bong, or are they a consumer that takes a drop of tincture before they go to sleep at night? Those types of things. Once we know that, then we can finally, and we have the form factor that appeals to them most, um, because they want to be discreet or because they want to roll and smoke a big fat blunt in front of their friends, whatever it is, that's part of their lifestyle. So once we know who they are, their need states and rituals, which leads us to our form factors, then we finally get to the brand archetypes. And that last archetype layer, if you will, is okay, cool. So if they are that soccer mom that's looking for microdosed mints, then we need to create a brand that appeals to soccer moms that are looking for microdosed mints. And if they're someone different, I mean, a great example would be St. Ives is now coming into the market, with not only beverages, cannabis infused beverages, but also blunts. And why wouldn't they? It fits so much into that culture that they've always served when selling a malt liquor in 7-Eleven or the local convenience store. So, there's all these other things that we don't really look at when we just look at the plant or when we look at a product. But there's all these things that we associate with that are really meaningful. And if you can get them all right, um, when you create a meaningful cannabis
Yeah.
brand. And what you
So
create is a loyal consumer.
yeah. So what you would suggest for like a cannabis brand just starting out is don't go with the shotgun approach. Try and capture, every user. Be more like a sniper and try and just kind of target specific niches inside of the whole spectrum of cannabis users.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is I call them cannabis consumers, not cannabis users. So
Nice.
now as we talk about consumers and their preferences, right? The language starts to change and the understanding starts to change because a user, that is such a dirty word in so many ways,
Yeah, they
but
say users are losers, right?
that's right. Right. So consumers now have preferences and and choose just like they select any other product. But that said, yeah, that's what this is all about, right? What this is all about is serving up the right product at the right time, and that might be a big split or it might be a microdose, mint. But to come back to your question, which is really how do how do we serve this up, and who are these people? Um, you know, that's how it all comes together with the meaningful brand and better understanding what they're looking for. But for those startup brands, which is where you were a moment ago in your question, for those startup brands, the first thing is a quality product, right? You can't get away from a quality product. So if and that starts with the plant. I'll say that, and however that plant changes over the course of time through extractions, through other types of manipulation, you got to start with a quality plant, and you have to be really smart about how you love that plant and what you put into it, because what you put into it is what you'll get out of it. So that's the first thing. But yeah, it is. Hey, who are we selling to? You know, what do they want? Can we serve it up to them better? Is there a more convenient way? Is there a smarter way? Like, there's all these other things, and that's where I think you start. You know, I mean, what makes the Jungle Boys so special is they're the Jungle Boys, and they grow great weed, or what is it, 40 pounds of light, from back, a minute ago, or Stravinsky, or I could throw out other names, but whoever it is, um, it starts off with a quality product, and it starts off with that's where they get their brand name and recognition, and then it goes from there. And whether it's their name or whether it's a brand or logo they create, that's how we as humans understand products. So I don't think cannabis would be any different.
Nice, nice. Now, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to check out our Smart Pot branding, but I was just curious if you did get a chance to check that out, and if you had any observations on it, or maybe how it fits in relative to the cannabis industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. I recognized the brand and I did take a look at it. What's interesting is from a functional perspective, right? Not necessarily from a cannabis perspective, but from a functional perspective. Um, the tagline doesn't call out that it's a fabric uh, product, which is interesting because I think um, often when I think about plant pots, I think about plastic, and so the fact that it's a little more sustainable, um, it's not called out initially. That was my first thought, like, oh, this is really interesting. As I dug in, I'm like, okay, cool. These are fabric pots. They're just not any pots, right? So they're more sustainable. The story is I don't know, a little bit more um, appealing to me. It's a brand archetype, right? It's that same thing. Oh wow, these are more sustainable. They're made out of fabric. Um, cool, I get this. There's an urban version. Wow, this makes sense. I relate to this, and therefore, there's that. The one thing which would be interesting, just to throw this out as a suggestion, and I didn't see this, but in the on the packaging, there's I don't want to call it, it's not necessarily a trellis, but it's certainly a graphic um, um, grouping of plants and vegetables. And it would be interesting to incorporate, assuming who your customers are and who you sell to, but to incorporate some cannabis leaves into that to imply that this is not only for fruits and vegetables, but it's also for this. And I'm not just to be clear, I'm not a big fan of throwing a cannabis leaf on anything. In fact, I always uh, pause and hesitate, um, before I do that, or before I'm always the guy to say, let's pull the leaf off and tell the story in a different way. But in this case, you're actually telling the story graphically, um, and with done in the right way. It's a hint and a nod to, hey, this is also great for this as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of do a dance, I guess, in the marketing realm with smart pots because we kind of have two, well, really three specific customers. We've got tree farmers, which is our original industry, lawn and garden, and then cannabis. And I would say your typical backyard grower, is a lot different from your typical cannabis grower, but at the same time, they're using the same product. So we um we have actually two different, I guess, product packaging and labeling designs. The one that you saw is that's kind of fruits, vegetables, and herbs. That's our lawn and garden, and then we've got a different tag for our bulk packaging, which goes more towards like the hydroponic stores and stuff like that. And yeah, I think based on kind of what you're telling me here, I think we're doing a pretty good job of referencing cannabis without having it be so in your face like that. So awesome,
Absolutely.
good to hear that we're on the right track there then.
And
um
most importantly is don't ever alienate your current customers for potential new customers. That's that's what that's what's most important. When you have a business that serves a market and now you see another market coming online, you still have to keep your eye on your bread and butter.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's a bit of a dance, but what's kind of cool is at least with legalization efforts and the overall acceptance of cannabis in society, it's not as tough as it was for us maybe 10 years ago or so.
Mhm.
I guess in terms of kind of looking forward, what do you think is on the horizon for the cannabis industry in terms of branding and marketing?
Well, I mean, right now, from my perspective, and again, it's probably because that's where my focus is. Branding and marketing seems to be pretty much everything. And again, I start off with a quality product is most important. So, so beyond that, right? Which is not just something to sniff at, but beyond that, branding and marketing, I think, will become everything. Just as I said earlier, every product, every product that we live and breathe and purchase is all about branding. And I mean, I'll just run through this quickly. In the 50s and 60s, um, everything was about efficiency. So it would use less gas. It would toast your toast, evenly and perfectly and fast. Um, and it was about efficiency. And then when we got to the 70s and 80s, it was about feeling. So it was not necessarily about the Mustang per se. It was about your hair, not us, but or back then, our hair blowing as we drove the car 80 or 90 miles an hour. It was about the exhilaration and the feeling, that we felt. And then we started to get into the 90s and 2000s where it was brands and logos and who we associated with and who we didn't associate with. And there were certain brands where you'd go into a store and all you really wanted was a sweatshirt or a hoodie, let's just say. And because of a logo on it, you wouldn't buy it because it associated you with all these other things. Or because, for example, my 12-year-old kid, if it's got a Nike logo on it, he's got to have it. So it's just interesting to see that association and disassociation. And then, really, as we come into sort of where we are today, we really, it's about our beliefs more than anything. We buy products now because we believe in certain things. There's certain causes or charities related to them, or they stand for certain things, right? A brand is a promise and the ability to consistently live up to that promise. So if a brand is telling you we stand for this and you believe in that, you're going to go buy that product until they mismanage your expectations, or until you mismanage your expectations. But bottom line, that's where we are today. So if you think about the arc of branding and all the things we've sort of grabbed onto over the course of time, it's only going to continue, and even more so because even the core people in cannabis, the cultivators, will still look at the plant and look at the beauty of the plant. But as that moves out away from the plant and becomes extracts and butters and distillates and isolates, it becomes ingredients in beverages and edibles, and finally down the road in toothpastes and mouthwash and all these soaps and all these other things that we won't even think about, where it came from. We'll just know that this is better for us, or it's a trend, like gluten free, right? Things become trends in products, and we accept them as consumers or not. But it's all about branding. It's all about marketing. It's all about that. And even that said, I just want to say it all starts from the plant. So you can't forget that cycle, that it always comes back to the plant. So I'm just a believer in what goes into the plant comes out of the plant.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. As a big advocate for cannabis, it all comes down to the plant, like you said. You could have the best marketing in the world, but if you crack open a jar and it doesn't meet your expectations, you're not going to be buying that product again. So, any final thoughts on your message? What you're working on in the future?
Well, yeah, my message is always, it starts with the plant, and what we're trying to do is normalize the plant. If we can normalize the plant, then and regulate it in reasonable ways, and find social equity and social justice and all the things that we're seeking. I think the plant is really a magical place to start for all of those things. So that's why I think the plant is so important. As far as me, on Monday nights I host a clubhouse show called Branding Bud, where I talk with different brand owners about what they're doing and what the market's doing. On Wednesdays, I have a podcast which is available at brandingbud.com. Every Wednesday, I launch a new podcast again on branding with brand owners in the cannabis space. And then on Fridays on LinkedIn Live at 10 a.m. PST, what I do is I have something called CannaFact Friday, where we take a trend and a data point, and we look at that and contextualize that so we have a better understanding. And a great example of that is, the cannabis infused beverage market is the fastest growing segment in cannabis form factors, but it only equates to 1 or 2% of the market as a whole. So,
Right.
If you just took the first snippet without the second snippet, you'd think many different things are going on. So we try to talk through some of the data points and contextualize things and spread the knowledge, spread the love, and do it in a way that's a little fun and humorous. But that's my Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And outside of that, I'm writing my next book, again, following up on branding by the commercialization of cannabis. So we've got the next edition of that coming out, which has updated brands. And then there's the Dank Dictionary, which is coming out as well, which is going to talk about words and the history of words, and sort of put them out there in a way that we can also better understand the development of what we call cannabis.
Nice, nice. And if people wanted to, reach out to you and kind of, get in touch with you, are you on social media like Instagram? Are you on YouTube, Facebook?
I am. Yes, I'm. On LinkedIn, you could find me there first. I think that's usually where it's easiest for me. But I'm on.
That's where we found you.
That's right. So LinkedIn first. Thank you, LinkedIn, and thank you for finding me. And then on Instagram at Branding Bud, on Twitter at Branding Bud, and on my website, which is brandingbud.com. And you could always reach out to me directly at david@brandingbud.com.
Awesome. David Paleschuck, this has been a really cool interview for me to conduct. I've learned a lot. Being in sales and marketing, myself, I was just like a sponge listening to you. So hopefully other people checking out this podcast will, help out. It'll help with their branding and, get them to think more about it and how important it is and going to be more important going forward. So thank you very much for your time and joining us on the Growing Revolution today.
Right on. Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.